What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. World Cup warm-ups are of course coming to our screens this weekend, so we're going to be checking out the teams that have been announced. This one's going to be for Scotland versus France. What a massive game for them coming up, playing at home over in Murrayfield. We're going to be checking out the teams that have been announced, giving our thoughts on some of the players and maybe thinking about a score prediction for this game. If you want to see more content like this and you want to see more rugby content generally on YouTube, make sure to support the smaller channels on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, drop this video a like. It really does help us out. Now then, Scotland versus France. We'll start out with the Scotland team first of all. Now, Scotland, of course, played Italy last week. I only caught the first half of it because the Rugby Championship games were going on. I need to make videos about that and stuff. Now, the first half for Scotland, not really looking very good. You know, when the high note of a half is talking about a seagull, it's never going to be that you've had a brilliant display. Italy going in at half-time last week in the lead, which I absolutely wasn't expecting. Scotland getting over the try line once and not scoring anything else for that half. So absolutely not the best performance they would want to see. They came back and managed to win that game. They managed to come back in the second half and actually put a bit of a convincing score on that scoreboard at the end. But I haven't actually seen the second half, so I don't know particularly what went on. But in terms of the team that's been announced for this week, just blanket changes across the board, which you'd sort of expect, right? They're going from playing Italy in a World Cup warm-up game where, you know, Italy aren't necessarily going to put on their strongest team either. Going up against France is certainly going to be a bigger test. Now, this one could be a bit of a target game. They are going to be playing each other twice over this series, but this is a game that I think will really be a big show for Scotland. They have a really tough pool coming up in the World Cup, going up against South Africa and Ireland. Going up against France, who are now world number 3, but it's their own World Cup. They'll be wanting to build to have a really solid performance as well. Putting on your main team against France, I think, is a really good indicator of where you can expect to be for those big games in Pool B. And of course, there's always the possibility Scotland manage to get the win over South Africa or Ireland or both and actually get out of their Pool B and end up facing France in the quarterfinal. It's a possibility that is there, so this is a game they do need to take pretty seriously. So starting out in this front row then, Pierre Schoeman alongside of Ewan Ashman and Xander Fagerson. Now, Schoeman, of course, a bit of a monster unit to just charge with the ball in hand, bit of a beast in terms of scrummaging, but also a bit of a nightmare in terms of your jackling. I really like that we're getting to a stage now in World Rugby where there's so many more props that are getting involved in jackling over the ball, and he absolutely wants to get involved in the middle of it. The French forward pack, as we got to see in that Six Nations, is also, you know, a bit of a force to be reckoned with. So you absolutely need, you know, big scrummages on here. So I'm liking this front row that they've gone for to start this one out. In the lock department, Richie Gray goes in alongside of Grant Gilchrist. Looking forward to see one of the Gray brothers back in. I'm actually not sure if both the Gray brothers are actually in the Scotland team. I should have looked that one up beforehand. And Grant Gilchrist taking that vice captain role alongside of Tui Pelotti. They like their captain to vice captain thing in Scotland. Now, Grant Gilchrist is one of those players that I do like to actually focus on a little bit on the channel because nobody talks about him really. You never get to hear a lot about Grant Gilchrist. He's one of those players that does so much like background work. He's doing loads and loads of tackles. He's committing hard. He's in so many breakdowns. He's doing a lot of the gritty stuff involved with rugby, but it's never highlight stuff. It's never running over, scoring a 20-meter try. He's never really picked up in commentator stuff, but he actually plays really solid games. If you ever want to just keep an eye out on a rugby player that, you know, maybe your focus isn't on for other games, keep an eye on Grant Gilchrist to see the amount of work that he actually puts into these games. In the back row then, Matt Fagerson moves to the 6 shirt, Hamish Watson in the 7 shirt, and Jack Dempsey going at 8. Now, Jack Dempsey has been kind of hit and miss for me. I think he's a really solid player. Sometimes temperament gets away from him a bit. And he just seems to be angry on the pitch. I don't know what that's about. He's an absolutely, you know, awesome player when he has the ball in hand and he's charging forward. Penalties still affect him a little bit. They still get on the wrong side, and they're normally just really silly penalties. And if he cuts them out, he can have some fantastic games. We've got to see it in the Six Nations, especially with playing with the fantasy. There was one round where Jack Dempsey just flew and had an absolutely superb game. Matt Fagerson being able to move to 6 as well. You've effectively got 2 number 8s, you know, in your team. There's some hard ball carrying going on here. The French defence with Sean Edwards, always a bit of a nightmare to get through. So having big ball carriers, and to be fair, all 3 of them, Fagerson, Hamish Watson, Jack Dempsey, 3 big ball carriers to try and get you those extra meters, just get over that game line, I think is a really nice move. In the halfback partnership, Ben White goes in alongside of Finn Russell. I'm really happy to be seeing Ben White here. I did think maybe like Ali Price or someone would be, maybe a first choice just based on number of caps going against France. Ben White is someone I can truly see as we get towards that World Cup being an absolute starter for Scotland. I hope he has a really long career with Scotland because I really like what Ben White brings to this team. Finn Russell was a surprise to me, not going to lie. I know he's probably the first choice fly half for a lot of people. I thought they might try out some other people. Of course, we got to see Ben Healy last week for Scotland. I thought they might want to shift it up and try someone else. Either they're going to move Blair Kinghorn to that 10, or Ben Healy would stay on and they would have someone else try and play fly off just to get a bit more like top tier 1 nation games with a secondary fly half in there and maybe put Finn Russell on the bench. But getting a start and getting the captaincy, it's going to be some wild captaincy from how much of a wild card Finn Russell can be. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that one. In the centre partnership, the Huey Pilotu combo comes back. Tui Pilotu and Hugh Jones back in. Chris Harris, I did say in last week's preview video, needed to put his stamp down on that 13 shirt, and from what I saw of that first half, he wasn't. So Hugh Jones coming back in at 13. Really looking forward to see this attacking combo. France have so many different centres as well. Jonathan Darcy and Gao Ficou. There's some really big centre partnerships over in France. So looking forward to see how these lads match up against a solid French defence as well. With so many tries coming in that Six Nations basically from these two, picking really nice lines and working together. I'm sure France will be keeping an eye out for these two in the centre partnership. And then finally, in the back three, Duhan van der Merwe goes in alongside Darcy Graham and Blair Kinghorn. Darcy Graham still keeping himself as a little bit of a nightmare, getting over for a try last week against Italy. I think he was the first try scorer, right? It's the only one I saw in the first half, I think. Anyway, you can never count him out. To give him any sort of room, he's going to be a bit of a nightmare. And Duhan van der Merwe, you sort of expect to, he's always going to be in that number 11 shirt, right? Blair Kinghorn at 15 is nice. I like Blair Kinghorn as a fullback. Of course, Ollie Smith was playing last week. Stuart Hogg is now gone through his retirement. So trying to find who's going to fit your fullback position. I think this is a good opportunity for Blair Kinghorn to try and stamp down. He wants to have that fullback shirt. Overall, this is a really solid looking Scotland team, 1 through 15. Not really any changes I would make along the way here. I'm really looking forward to see how this team gets on. In terms of the replacements quickly then, Dave Cherry, Jamie Batty and WP Now. That's a pretty solid set of forwards to come on in that second half. Dave Cherry feels like I haven't read that name for a long time. Looking forward to seeing him back in the team. Rest of the replacement forward, Scott Cummings and Rory Darge, of course, was captaining last week, will come on. I'm not sure where he will come on, actually. Maybe he'll come on for Jack Dempsey and they'll move Matt Fagerson back to 8. Maybe he'll come on directly for Matt Fagerson, or Hamish Watson's done a bit of swapping around. So there's certainly some nice utility in that back rows for them. And then the replacement backs, George Horn, Cameron Redpath and Ollie Smith. Now, I didn't get to see the second half, like I said. Cameron Redpath, I think, was on the bench last week as well. I have no idea how Cameron Redpath did. I might try and find some highlights before we get to this weekend's game. And then Ollie Smith as well, who was doing okay from what I saw in that first half. Nothing, particularly wild. The counter-attacking runs was absolutely not what we got to see from Stuart Hogg. But Ben Healy feels like he replaced the Stuart Hogg boot with the amount of long-range kicks he was having. So interesting to not see Ben Healy in this side. Just to bring him on in the second half and get you some long-range kicks to kick you further up the field later in that second half. Thought it might have maybe been a nice move. Maybe have him on instead of like Ollie Smith. But I guess what they're thinking is Blair Kinghorn's also capable of moving to 10. So if you need Ollie Smith to come on, Finn Russell off, Ollie Smith on, Blair Kinghorn moves to 10. That's probably what they're sort of thinking of doing. So it's a nice team overall. Looking forward to see how they get on against this France team. Moving on to France then, who have put out quite an interesting team. Not the one I was expecting at all. I thought going up against Scotland, they haven't been playing since the Six Nations. You want to get yourselves properly warmed up for that World Cup. I expected France to put out a pretty big team, especially with going over to Murrayfield as opposed to actually playing this one at home. But yeah, we'll have a run through the team. A lot of new names in here for me, so apologies if I get any terrible pronunciations. Feel free to drop them down in the comments. Some better phonetic spellings for me. So in the front row, Jean-Baptiste Gros goes in alongside Bougerie and Demba Bamba. Now, it's not a bad front row by any means. Some good players in there, but absolutely not the typical standard French front row that we'd be expecting to see in in a massive game for like a World Cup. Injury worries are going to be a bit of a thing leading towards the World Cup. The worst thing you can do in these World Cup warm-up games is have massive injuries, as teams like Australia are finding in the minute with Ala Toa. You can't afford to have mega injuries, especially with them going up against New Zealand. in that Pool A group. So it's a perfectly fine front row, but absolutely not what I expected to see going into this one. In the lock department, a kind of similar story as well. Cameron Vokey coming back into the side. Of course, we didn't get to see a lot of him in that Six Nations because Thibaut Flamand was absolutely crushing it in that lock department in the number 4 shirt. It's nice to see Cameron Vokey come back inside here, alongside of Chalarus. I know Paul Valemsa starting this one either. Paul Valemsa's on the bench for this one. So some big calls in the lineup decision making, especially with Scotland having a number of big jumpers in their team as well at the lineup. We'll have to see how they get on. In the back row, then a new name for me here, Paul Boudahon. I'm going to hopefully not butcher that name completely. That's a brand new name for me. I'm not entirely sure of the pronunciation. Sekou Makalu goes in the number 7 shirt, an open side flanker, and Johan Tonga goes in the number 8 shirt. Now Makalu, of course, can swap between flanker. He can be at 8. You can chuck him on a wing. He's got a great amount of speed on him. Nice to see him back in the team. He's someone I really want to see more from. Ever since we sort of first got him onto the scene, it was in an Autumn Nations Cup a couple of years back, the first time I got to see Sekou Makalu. So I'm looking forward to see more from him and get more involved in that team. But such a competitive shirt to get involved with in that back row of France with the likes of Charles Olivant, Dylan Cretin, Francois Cross, Gregory Aldrit. You know, there's so many big names there. Really hard to get your name in the mix, but nice to see him in there for this one. In the halfback partnership, Couillou goes in alongside of Matteo Jalibert. Now, Antoine Dupont not playing. You know, I imagine he's going to be captaining going into that World Cup. Jalibert did definitely take over the fly half shirt for a good amount of time, you know, in between Entomac. They tried playing Entomac at centre. So this is a slightly lesser capped halfback partnership than you'll probably be seeing towards that World Cup as well. But good to get these sort of partnerships in now. I imagine Couillou Jalibert will be a sort of partnership we'll see for maybe games like against Italy, or maybe some of the tier 2 teams that we have in that Pool A as opposed to going up against New Zealand. So best to get it in now against a team like Scotland, who are absolutely going to put you under the pressure, get you experienced in that world. In the centre partnership, Mofana goes in alongside of Guilton. Hopefully, again, sort of getting that pronunciation correct. Some new names for me. I really enjoy that France have not got such a depth of squad to feel like they've got an A team and a B team. They've now got more players coming in. The depth of this squad is just immense. You know, and centre partnership to be fighting for as well, because they've got some big names in that centre. Ficou, Jonathan Dante, stamping their names down. This is a great opportunity to get your name in the ring for getting involved with the World Cup as well. And then finally, in the back three, another new name as well for me in here as well. So in the left wing, Dumortier on the left wing, Belle Bayery for the right wing, and finally Bryce Dulin for the fullback. There's a name I feel like I haven't said for a while. Again, another one who was absolutely key to this France team at one point, but so much depth in fullbacks. I feel like I haven't said his name in an awfully long time. Dulin getting the captaincy as well. I'm not sure of previous captaincy roles in terms like under 20s or at club level, so for a lot of the French team. France is certainly one of the teams of the Six Nations teams I probably know the least about, but very surprising to see that France have gone down this route. There's probably a little bit of a worry here that maybe too many changes, too many new players might actually be a bit of a bad thing going up against the Scotland team that looks pretty stacked. To be fair, I think Scotland will fancy some good chances for this one. In the replacements quickly then, Malvaca goes in alongside of Wardy and Falatea, which is a good replacement front row actually. Again, they've, just to show the depth in this squad, that they're missing people like Cyril Bay, Antonio, Julien Marchand. They're not in the team, and they've still got, a pretty good front row to start out and some replacement front rows to come on there, absolutely to bolster that. That's a really nice thing to see from this France team as we get close to the World Cup. Rest of the replacement forwards, Paul Valemsa and Dylan Cretin, two names you're more likely to have been seeing in this France team as well. So coming on from the bench, there's actually quite a lot of experience in that forward pack that can come on in that second half. Maybe if the game's not going their way, mix it up in that second half, put some experienced heads on and try and turn the tables a little bit. And then in the replacement back, Baptiste Saran goes in alongside of Hastoy and Arthur Vincent. So there's quite a big bench there, to be fair. So they've started out maybe for me a bit more of a 50-50 France team with this starting 15, but the bench is looking pretty loaded with some talented players as well. So maybe this is a good way for them to experience getting on some new boys, get on some lower cap players, get them involved in some tier 1 rugby before we head to that World Cup. Probably be seeing some of these names going up against like tier 2 sides as opposed to like the New Zealand side. But I like the move to have, a bit of a bigger bench as well to come on just to seal out that game. You want to win. it's tier 1 rugby. You know, you absolutely want to get those wins, but having these lads get experience is going to be pretty invaluable when it comes around to the World Cup. So what do we think in terms of a score prediction? Because seeing that France team has sort of thrown me a bit. You know, you'd absolutely think France would be taking this one. They won this fixture in the Six Nations, but I'm wondering whether France might have undercut it a little bit too much with a few too many changes. And Scotland might be up for this one, but Scotland's performance against Italy, not the best last week, but a number of big changes for them to add in the bigger team. For me, I'm going to say a Scotland win. I'm going to go probably against the bookies' favourites this one. I'm going to say a Scotland win, and I'm going to say by 4. That's going to be my prediction for this one, guys. Make sure to drop down in the comment section your thoughts on the teams along with your own score predictions. Of course, we do have the Super Brew running alongside for the Rugby World Cup warm-up. So you haven't joined up yet. You've got 2 days left to join in. There's a bunch of games to pick. So much fun. Make sure you go check out that video to find out how to join in as well. I'll see you all next time, guys. Bye-bye.